Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. Today is going to be a video that was actually requested ages ago and I've just been really struggling to get around to make it. Yeah, about 6 weeks ago a couple of subscribers actually responded to one of my previous videos, which was the review of the Sony a6700, and basically people were actually really interested in seeing it go against my old camera, which I sort of side graded from, which was the Sony a7R III. So today I'm going to be running you through just a few of the differences between them, a few of the reasons that I decided to switch over to the a6700, and basically kind of just giving you a bit of a lowdown and just seeing how the image quality stacks up against each other. So I'll be going out into the field, I'll shoot some images and make sure that I kind of get quite a nice comparison between the two. And then I'll come back into the office and we'll look through the resulting images from the shoot. So yeah, that should be really interesting. But first things first, I just wanted to run you through a few of the main differences between the two. And basically I'll run you through the pros, well, as I see it, shooting landscapes and nature primarily, the pros of the a6700 and then the pros of the Sony a7R III. So yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. Whoop. So the main pro of the Sony a6700 is the fact that it is a crop sensor camera, so that basically means that it's going to be a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter weight than the a7R III. And the a7R III isn't a really heavy camera by no means. The camera itself is actually, you know, really quite nice and compact for a full frame camera, but it comes along with the fact that the lenses are just really heavy. So with the APS-C camera you get access to the APS-C lenses, and then that means that your whole kit ends up being that bit smaller and lighter. So that was one of the main things. So for hiking, it means that I can have one kit that kind of does it all, rather than beforehand I had one kit for hiking and then another kit with the a7R III that I would take on my kind of main photo shoots. But yeah, when I was hiking those long distances, it does really start to weigh you down after a while, and you know, having all that weight on your back all day long is not good for you really. It's got world-class autofocus. So the autofocus of the a6700 has come straight out of the Sony a7R V, so their most current A7R series camera, and that is it's kind of an AI assisted autofocus, so it's got lots of features in there that make it really accurate, and that was one of the big drawbacks with the a7R III. It's got a fully articulating touchscreen. It works really well, can't fault it at all. It isn't the newest type of touchscreen that the a7R V has. That touchscreen does look better, but you know, this touchscreen of the a6700 is still really good. So yeah, I'm very happy with that, and that was again one of the main reasons that I switched over. It also has really good video specs, so you know, you can shoot 4K in up to 120 frames a second with a bit of a crop, which I didn't really appreciate when I first got it, but it has become one of my favorite features of the camera when I'm shooting video, is to move it over into either 60 frames a second or 120 frames a second and get some really good stable shots. And it's also just got a lot of modern tech in it basically. So rather than a camera from 2017 with the a7R III, which was top of the line when it first came out, but you know, it is, what is that now? That's 7 years old, so it is getting a little bit long in the tooth basically, and you know, that was starting to show with some of that technology being a little bit dated. And now the a6700 has things like focus bracketing, so being able to set your focus and then the camera kind of automatically brackets, so it moves the plane of focus throughout your image, and then you can blend those images in Photoshop and get a nice sharp image from back to front basically. So yeah, there's that, and then there's also things like with video you can do electronic stabilization. So it has got IBIS in it. The a7R III has IBIS in it, but I believe this to be better, and it's also got the electronic stabilization modes as well, so that's kind of another string to its bow really. And then moving over to the a7R III, the main pros with that camera, so it has got much more megapixels, so it's got 42 megapixels, which is great if you're printing photos. You know, that's really going to show up with your big prints. You're going to be able to see some of those fine details a lot better. But if you're just looking at your photos on a screen, especially just a phone screen, you know, those megapixels, they really don't make the difference. So yeah, it has got more megapixels. It's also got a much bigger sensor, so it's a full frame sensor rather than APS-C. That means that you can draw a lot more light into the sensor, and it's going to, in theory, have a lot better low light performance as well. So, you know, when you're shooting in kind of in indoors, or, you know, getting closer to nighttime, the full frame sensor should be much better at capturing light in those conditions. But basically, I think that the A7R III was never that great in low light because of those high megapixels. It was never its real like selling point. You know, the A7S line and the A7 line with the lower megapixel count, but with the full frame sensor, those were the better cameras for shooting in low light situations. And the A6700 actually has a stacked sensor, so that means that performs really well in low light as well. And if you couple that with one of the faster 1.4, 1.8 lenses, it works really well for nighttime photography. But I have used the A6700 and the A6400 for astrophotography, and I find the results to be really impressive for crop sensor cameras. So the next thing to mention with the A7R III is the fact that the actual body of the A7 series, I find them to be a lot more ergonomic. I find the dials and controls to be in much more intuitive places, and I find the whole thing, although it is bigger and heavier, it's a lot more, it just feels a lot better in your hand basically. So actually, here is the A7R III. I just love the way it feels in the hand. You know, this is great as well. The A6700, they have improved the battery grip on this, so the ergonomics are a lot better than they used to be with the A6000 line. But the A7R III, you know, I still prefer that body. It's a little bit bigger and chunkier, it feels better in the hand. It's also got the joystick, that's another big plus point for me, being able to move your autofocus point around and that kind of thing with the joystick. That is a really good selling point in my opinion. And the last thing to mention is the fact that the A7R III had a dual card slot, so you could shoot JPEGs onto one card, RAW onto one card, or you could do video onto one card, photos onto another, and that kind of thing. Or you can just back up everything that you're shooting with another card, which is kind of giving you an instant backup there, which is a really great thing for a lot of photographers. But for me, not the most important thing in the world, and hence why I am still happy with this. But you know, if you had to choose, you probably would want to, I guess. So yeah, those are the main kind of pros of each camera. Take from that what you will. I mean, some people will find some of those features really interesting and really useful to them for their style of shooting, and then other people might think that's not so important. So yeah, I think the next thing to do is to actually go out into the field, and we'll have a look at using the cameras out in the field. We'll see if there's much comparison between them when you're looking at the back of the cameras, and yeah, ideally get some great shots and some kind of as identical as possible shots to kind of compare afterwards. Then we'll come back into the office, we'll have a look at those on the computer and see exactly how they compare. So I'm on the side of this hill at the moment, overlooking a really nice scene. So I've got both cameras set up. I have tried to get to as identical a focal length as I can with these two cameras. So I've got the A7R III with the Tamron 28-75, and that's zoomed all the way in at 75mm. And then the A6700, I've got the Tamron 18-300 on there, and that's at 50mm, so that's giving me kind of the identical frame. When you punch into the A7R III and you really pixel peep, you know, that resolution is incredible, even on the back of the screen, without going and putting it on the computer. But to be honest with you, punching into the A6700 as well is looking really nice and sharp. You know, that's looking great. There's really no issues with that. So, you know, there's always going to be a little bit of a loss of resolution. You're talking about a 42 megapixel full frame sensor versus a 26 megapixel APS-C sensor. So the size of the sensor is much smaller, and there's so many less megapixels as well. So, you know, there is going to be a bit of a loss of resolution there, but you know, so far the images, when you look at both of them on the back of the screens, one second, let me just get that up again. Yeah, they're looking they're looking good. The other thing to mention is the focal length. Like I said, I've got the 28 to 75 on the A7R3, and that is as zoomed in as I can get, and even with that it's not getting me as zoomed in as I'd like to be for the ideal composition. So I will shoot this scene and we'll compare these shots, but also what I'm probably going to do is I'm going to take the exact same shot with either camera, and I'll put the A7R3 into crop sensor mode, and I'll put the exact same lens on, so we'll have the 18 to 300 on both cameras, and then we can really get a good comparison on the full frame camera with the full frame lens and the full frame camera with the APS-C lens, and we'll see what the difference is. I think the equivalent megapixels when the A7R3 is in crop sensor mode is 18, I believe, 18 megapixels. So 18 to 26, there's a bit of a difference there. So in that respect, the A6700 might end up coming out on top. So I really don't know how this is going to go. I may end up deciding that, I can't sell this A7R3. I really want to keep it. I doubt that will happen because I'm so happy with the A6700 so far. So I would like to get rid of the A7R3, but I've been kind of saving it so that I can do this comparison video and make sure that I make an informed decision at the end of the day. So yeah, I'll wait around a little bit longer, see if the light changes, maybe tinker around with a few other compositions while I'm here, and yeah, we'll get back to you in a little while. Okay, so I'm back at home now. I've got the computer in front of me, I've got all of the images loaded up, and we're going to have a look to see whether there's any glaring differences between the photos here. Did I make the right decision switching to APS-C, or did I make a really big mistake? Let's find out. So this first image that we're looking at now, this was the main composition that I spent most of the afternoon shooting, and this is the Sony A7R3 with the Tamron 28 to 75mm. So you can see here nothing is jumping out at it being a particularly amazing shot. The dynamic range is all captured, the histogram looks good over here. And then if we switch over to the A6700, you can see there's a very slight change in terms of the composition. But other than that, there's really nothing. Maybe a very slight color shift actually, but nothing too glaringly obviously bad about the images. So if we first off zoom in to the A7R3, you can see, wow, there's a lovely load of resolution there in the middle of the frame. All of the buildings are lovely and sharp. It was shot at f11, so good aperture to get everything nice and sharp in the frame. Even towards the edges of the image here, everything is looking good. It does sort of soften up towards the back here, and I don't know whether that's the lens or the fact that it was a very slight bit hazy, and obviously I was shooting quite far off in the distance there. But you can see back into the middle of the frame here, and the windmill is looking fantastically sharp again. These cows on the side of the hill, they're looking great. So yeah, obviously full frame sensor, 42 megapixel, good job, it does look good really. And then if we switch over to the A6700, again we'll have a look at the middle of the frame. So wow, this is actually really good, to be perfectly honest. This is really a nice surprise. So the buildings are looking great, they look like they've got plenty of resolution. All of the trees are looking nice and sharp here, even towards the edges of the frame. Maybe it gets slightly softer around the edges there. But then if we move back up to the windmill again, yeah, there's great resolution. The cows are sharp on the side of the hill there. So that looks fantastic. And then if we switch back to the A7R3, yeah, so the A7R3 does have quite a bit more resolution to it. But is it that much? Is it enough to upgrade your camera for? Is it enough to keep with a heavy system? Probably not, and not for me, to be honest with you. So I'm happy with that. The A6700 I think holds up really well in terms of resolution there. So the next thing we're going to do, we're going to switch over and we're going to have a look at two images which were shot with exactly the same lens but on the different cameras. So both of these images were shot with the Tamron 18 to 300mm, which is a crop sensor lens, so it isn't the most amazing lens in the world. It's only about £500 to buy it. Actually, I did a review of that. You can watch it here if you're interested. But yes, let's have a look at these two images and see exactly how they stack up against each other. So this first image that we're looking at now is the A7R3 which looks great. You know, there's no real glaringly obviously bad things about it. I should have mentioned that the A7R3, that does drop down to 18 megapixels when it goes into crop sensor mode. So, you know, there may be a chance that the resolution doesn't hold up as well as the 26 megapixels of the A6700. So this shot here, you can see again, there's a very slight change between the compositions, and then there's also a very slight change in color temperature as well. But between them, you know, you really couldn't tell the difference just looking at them. But when we pixel peep, let's see. So this first shot is the A6700. You can see all of these trees here. There's loads of detail in them. Even these ones over here, yeah, it's all looking lovely and sharp. So that looks fantastic. And then if we move over to the A7R3, again, looks really good. Plenty of detail. I would say between them, maybe there's more detail in the A6700. I would just say it pips it to the post. So yeah, again, no big deal really. You know, there's no real difference between these images. And what I'm just trying to show you is that, you know, whether you're shooting with a crop sensor camera or a full frame camera, really the images that you're getting out of it with landscape photography, most of the time, unless you're in really challenging lighting conditions, they're going to look exactly the same basically. So just to show you a couple of final images here, this first one here, so this is the shot, the main shot that I shot with the A6700, and I've just done a bit of dodging and burning. I've just put a little bit of light kissing the hillside there and some in the foreground here to draw the eye towards this church and the town there. And if we compare it to the before photo, so that was before and after, before, after, before, after. You see there's, you know, if you know what you're doing with editing, you can really move the light around and make it a much more dynamic image. And then again, if we do it with the other image, so that was before with the A6700, and then after, before, after, before, after. So I've just done a bit of dodging and burning again, put a little bit of emphasis on the windmill there, you know, done a bit of burning around the edge to, you know, draw the eye away from these trees that are in the periphery of the image and draw it into what I want you to look at, which is the focal point being the hillside and the windmill there. So yeah, like I say, there's no real difference between these images, and with a little bit of editing, you know, both of them shoot with RAW obviously, so I can do whatever I want with editing. Other than being very challenging lighting conditions, most of the time I don't even notice the difference between shooting full frame and crop sensor. Well, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. I think the A6700 really held its own there against the A7R3. You know, the A7R3, bigger sensor, bigger megapixels and everything, but the little A6700 really held its own, I think. Yeah, I'm really happy I made the change. And needless to say, this video is not to make everyone go out and buy a brand new camera or anything like that, but I just wanted to show you the differences between them. And really, when it comes down to image quality, even with the bigger sensor and more megapixels, it doesn't make that much of a difference most of the time. So yeah, I'm very happy I made the decision I did. If you've enjoyed this video and you want to watch more like it, please subscribe to the channel, like the video if you haven't already, that really helps the channel as well, and hit the bell icon if you want to stay up to date on any future videos like this that I'm releasing. Believe me, there's going to be plenty more where that came from, and I really enjoyed making this one. I'm Josh, and I'll see you soon. Bye.